Hello and welcome to this video on getting started with Bootstrap 5. If you were here for the previous videos in this series, then you know this is a series and you know what it's all about. If you were not here, then please be advised that you are arriving at the end of the series where we're going to go through the course project. So I'm going to assume that you've been here since the beginning. That means that you've got a good handle on what Bootstrap is, how to get it into your site, how to use the grid to lay out your website in a responsive way, and how Bootstrap's utilities and components work. We've covered a lot in this course, and the point of this video is now to bring a number of the skills and concepts we've learned together into one project. And that project will be building this website. What is this website? Good question. It's nothing, or in any event, it's a fake website for a fake company, You and Me Widgets. Maybe it's a product information page of some kind, doesn't really matter. The point is that it's going to be a good exercise for us as we practice some of the things we've learned along the way about Bootstrap. We'll build this website up section by section from the top down. We'll use the grid to lay it out, including Bootstrap's Flexbox-based alignment utilities to create a nice responsive design. We'll get some practice with the utility classes we've already seen and with a number of utility classes we haven't seen yet. And similarly, we'll use components we've seen and components we haven't, including, for example, forms, button groups, and this Breadcrumbs Navigation Bar that we also haven't seen before. In addition, we'll see how we can change Bootstrap's defaults in our external style sheet, which is how I make this slightly customized button group. In past videos, I took quite a bit of care to go into the details about how the various aspects of Bootstrap work. In this one, I'll take a bit of a different approach. This is going to be more demonstration than explanation. So I'll fly through it a bit more quickly, showing how it all comes together, but not worrying too much about what's going on behind the scenes or the concepts that are at play. Just like with past videos, all the code I'm going to write will happen on screen, so if you want to follow along, you can do so, and if you do exactly what I do, your computer will do exactly what my computer does. And I'm going to put all the code that I write here into a public CodePen, which you can access in the link below this video. And without further ado, let's get started. I'll start by opening up a new folder on my desktop. I'll call it Project, and I'll spell it properly. And I'm going to open this up with VS Code. Create a new file, call it index.html. And create another new file and call that one styles.css. For index.html, let's go into the Bootstrap documentation and grab that starter template, which is found in this introduction page. So we're not going to use the CDN just for the CSS or the JavaScript. I'm going to do the easiest possible way and use the starter template here. Copy the link and paste it directly into my HTML file. We can link the external style sheet to styles.css, and this project website actually won't use JavaScript at all, so I'm just going to delete all of that JavaScript stuff entirely. Update the title and the H1 to project, and we're ready to go. Let's hit save, bring it up with live server, and make sure this is working. Yep, it is. Good. Let's take a look at our website that we're going to build. This is the model we're working off of, and we'll start with this heading section, this header section. This is built with a row and two columns, and those two columns are separated so that they're occupying either side of the row. When we narrow the browser, they change their alignment so that they're now occupying the center space. So we'll see one way of doing that, and along the way we're also going to look at how to get this icon into the website, and this is a Bootstrap icon. So we'll go to the Bootstrap docs and get a quick lesson on how to use Bootstrap's icons. Okay, so step one is remove this H1 tag because I'm not going to use it. So we'll start with a div and a container fluid. Under that, I'll create a header tag, and inside the header, a class attribute with row. So this is something we haven't done before. Typically, I've been using the generic div for the row and column classes, but you can actually use rows and columns and pretty much any other class on HTML semantic elements as well. I'm making a header, so I'm going to use the header semantic tag. Within the row, I'll have two columns, both being call auto. And for both those columns, I'll give them a background color of red, which in Bootstrap lingo is BG Danger. And to start things off, just some filler content. Save that, bring it up with Live Server. And you can tell we've got a ways to go. So how do we turn this into this? Well, let's focus on getting these columns in the right spot. So jumping back into the code, I want each column to be placed on either side of the row, and for that I'm going to use our alignment class of justify content between. Let's save that, and there we can see that that is successful. One thing about this project website is the content does not get pushed up to the either side of the viewport as this stuff does. It's contained within these margins, and for that I'm going to put a maximum width on this row. And that brings us to the external style sheet, which we haven't touched yet. So I'm going to create a class called main_width, and I'm going to give it a max width of 60 rem. Save that, and on my row I'll put my main_width class. Let's save that, bring it up, and yep, so we can see main_width has taken effect, but it's not centered. So we know how to do that. We'll use MX Auto. Hit save. Let's bring this up, and it has worked. So now we have a layout which is actually pretty similar in principle to what we're going for. Next, let's focus on making our logo look like it does here. This is created with an H1 tag and font weight of bold. So on the first column, I'll create an H1 and give it a class attribute of FW bold, which is a Bootstrap utility class that we did not look at before, but trust me, it makes a bold font. And for content, it's you and me widgets. Save. All right, so far so good. And by the way, I'm keeping this background color here just because it helps us see where the elements are, what their parameters are, and it makes it easier to troubleshoot why things aren't working as you may want them to. Step 2, let's get that square icon into the logo. For that, I'm going to go to, again, getbootstrap.com, this time down in the extend section, and there's a thing there for icons, and where are we now? A link here to learn more about icons takes you to this voluminous list of various icons that are available for you in Bootstrap. And where is my icon? Ah, gotcha. So this is what I used, and the way you would get it into your site, or one way you can get it into your site, is just to copy the HTML or the SVG tag like this. So it's now copied. I'll minimize that guy, and I'm going to stick it right before the H1 tag. Control V, Control S, and there it is. So it's not looking quite like we want. I see, pardon me. I've got to actually place it within the H1 tag. Control V, remove some space, Control S, and now it's positioned as I want. To make it a bit bigger, we can just adjust the width and height attributes. So I'm going to make both 45, hit save, and that's pretty good. You can see that the alignment of the icon is not quite what we're going for. In the final version of the site, it's a little bit more centered. And for that, I'm going to place a class on the SVG itself called align-bottom. So first I'll wrap the text, and right here, align bottom. There, so now those two are pretty much the same. Next, let's replace that ugly red content with this very nice looking Bootstrap button. We go back into the code, and now we're going to work on this part right here, And for this, we can create a good old-fashioned button tag, which will have a class of, as we saw before, a base class of btn, and this one's going to have a modifier class of btn outline primary. For content, hit sign in, hit save, and that's what it looks like. Now, of course, our red background is kind of messing things up, but I'm going to leave it for now. This, though, is a bit of a different shape than that, and the way we change that is by going with rounded pill. So that's a border class, which changes the border to this rounded shape. And my button needs an href. And I think I will now remove that background danger. The very sharp-eyed among you will notice that this button here is not aligned quite the same as this guy here. So it's a bit tough to see, but basically in the model website, the button's pretty much centered. It's actually not exactly centered, but I'll take care of that. It's pretty much centered against the logo, whereas what we have, the button's positioned a bit too high. To remedy that, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that rows, such as this row, are Flexbox containers. This row being a flex container, this column is a flex item, and so I can use the align self property, and I'm going to put it as align self end for now. Watch that button, I hit save, it's come down a little bit. So now it's actually the same as it is here. Now I mentioned that this even itself actually isn't perfect. I think the better option to use would be, in fact, align self center. So I save it, and now I'm pretty sure those are pretty much lined up perfectly. And we're just about done with this header section. The next thing we have to deal with, though, is the fact that right now this is not responsive. So when the sign in button wraps there, it's doing so not because there's a breakpoint engaged, but because the content is forcing these columns to wrap. What we want is for it to behave like this. So right about there, before they're crammed together, they wrap, and similarly the next section below will wrap at the same time. So let's make this guy now responsive. That's easy. We've seen how to do that. I'm going to simply add to my column class a breakpoint rule so that it'll be engaged at the small breakpoint. So what this means, I'll focus down here. What this means, call-sm auto, is that this column is going to behave mobile first, meaning that it'll stack at the lowest breakpoint size, but then at the small size, it'll behave as a call auto class. So let's save that and see if it worked. Yep, there it is. So now it is stacking at the same point as this guy is stacking. So far, so good. Next, we need to get these things centered on the small breakpoint, or pardon me, on the extra small breakpoint size. So on the model we're working on, we can see that the items are centered, whereas here they are not. There are a few ways to do that. One is to use Flexbox, which we did not really cover in our prior videos, so I'm not going to focus on that, but I'll just really quickly show what that would look like. So I'm going to make this column here also a flex container. It's already a flex item of the row, but if I make it a flex container with this deflex utility and add justify content center, and then hit save, we can see now that first column there has its content centered. And if I were to do that on the sign in button, the same thing would work. Although to make that possible, yeah, actually no, that's easy enough. So deflex, justify content center, save, and done. All right, well, I could just leave it there, but I'll actually just really quickly show you another possibility. So I'm going to delete both of those, hit save, and up on this row class, I'm instead going to add text center. Hit save, and the same thing works. When I expand the window out, it's the way we want it to be, and when I put it back, it's still the way we want it to be. So take your pick between those two options. And the last thing we need to do to finish off this header is to put in a horizontal rule underneath it, and then also deal with some spacing issues. So I'm going to now actually change this window so that it's a little bit easier to see the changes as I update the HTML file as we go. Let's see, expand this a little bit. First, the horizontal rule. Underneath the header, I'll just go HR, hit save, and that works. Now you'll notice that the horizontal rule is wider than the parameters of the header. That's because the header is constrained by the main width class. Next, I need some space above and below this row. And for that, I'm going to use one of the spacing utilities we've seen, which is my4. Hit save, and you can see that updated. Now that's looking pretty good. It's not exactly the same. And to make my life easier at this point, I'm going to remove BG danger. Hit save. Now when I narrow the browser, you can see these two items, the columns are pretty cramped, and I don't want them to be so cramped as they are there. So for that, I'm going to put space between each of the columns on their top and bottom. And I'll use my-2. Hit save, and you can see the website just updated, and now it looks basically the same as our goal. And I'm noticing that there's apparently a slight discrepancy when I go back and forth between the two. I actually think that's coming from this scroll bar, which is adding a little bit of height on top and a little bit of width on the side, just because of the scroll bar icons. So I do think that these are actually spaced exactly the same. And I'm actually not wild about this setup I have here, so I'm going to just expand that guy again, pull it out a little bit, and expand this window as well. Okay, whoa. That's funky, didn't want that to happen. Okay, so I've got a problem here. And I see what it is. I managed to combine two classes, so that messed things up. Hit space, hit save, and now it's working again. Okay, so that's the header. Now, next step, this breadcrumbs navigation thing and the search bar. So one thing to notice about this is, again, it is stuck within the same parameters of the content within the header. So I'm going to wrap all of the content right down to this next ruler in our main width class. So let's start by just doing that. Under the header, I'll make a wrapper div, and I'm just going to give it the main width class. And everything down to the footer will go inside that. And I may as well just do my HR element right there. The structure of this next section is going to look pretty similar to the last one. So we'll have two columns which are separated with the maximum amount of space between them on these higher breakpoint sizes. And then as the browser narrows, they'll be placed in the center. To start things off, I'll make a section. I'm going to give it a class of row. And within the row, two columns of call SM auto. And again, for starters, I'm going to give each of them background color of danger, as well as some filler content. Hit save. Let's bring that up. Okay, good. It's a start. We need to go through the same process as we went through with the above section. So I'm going to, on the row class, use justify content between. And on my wrapper div, actually, I'm going to put MX auto to center everything. Hit save. There we go. And we can see that the contents are in fact centered within the parameters of the wrapper div. Let's begin with the breadcrumb. So right here, I'll start by removing those random contents, and I'm going to create a nav element, and inside it, an ordered list. Inside the ordered list, a bunch of LIs. Let's see, I'll use 3 LIs. And I'm going to use for content just list item for now. Let's save that and see what it looks like. Okay. To turn this into a breadcrumb navigation bar, we need to use Bootstrap's classes. To start with, the base class. On the ordered list, I'm going to give it a class attribute and a class of breadcrumb. Hit save, and we see now it's changed a little bit, so now it's an inline list, but it's pretty ugly. What I have to do here is, on each of the LI items, give them a class attribute as well, and this time a modifier class for breadcrumb items. So we've got our base class and our modifier classes. Hit save. Hit save. Nothing happened. Because I misspelled the class name, take the S off breadcrumb item, hit save, and there we go. That's much better. Now again, I'm going to remove the background danger from this row because it's not really necessary and not looking very nice. This is our Breadcrumbs Navigation Bar. I'll make one of them active by default. So that's this guy. And I want to have links inside these list items. The first one will be home. The second one can be our widgets. And the last one I'll make FAQ. Hit save, bring it up. Oy. Remove my list item text. Now hit save, now bring it up, and now it looks about right. Except that the last item here doesn't need to be in an anchor tag because it's not going to be a link. There we go. These links are underlined, whereas what I'm going for is to not have them underlined. And there's a Bootstrap utility class for that as well. And this feature here is called text decoration. And the Bootstrap class we use is text decoration none, placed on the A tags themselves. Save that, and there we go. So now the text decoration is gone. Next, let's work on this search bar, which currently looks like a red div with random contents. So we want it to look like this. And it's going to go in this column right here. So replace that random contents with first an input tag. Type text is fine, and I'm going to use a placeholder with content search. And I'll put an ARIA label on here, again of search. Save that, bring it up, and that's what it looks like. So this is pure HTML, basically no Bootstrap involved. To make this into a Bootstrap form, we go onto the input tag, add a class attribute, and a class name of form control. I'll save that, and that's our default Bootstrap form control. I want it to look, or stylistically to match this button here with the rounded borders. So I'll throw on a class we've already seen before, which is rounded pill. Updates, and there we go, that looks good. But next, we're going to have a problem here with our responsive design. So this I do not like. When we move into that smallest breakpoint, the search bar is taking up more space than I want, and we need to get this breadcrumbs thing centered. Let's start with the breadcrumbs one. One interesting thing about the breadcrumb is that the breadcrumb class actually creates a flex container. There it is down there. There's our .breadcrumb class coming through Bootstrap's style sheet, and it's got a display flex. And we can use that to center content of the items within it. So I'm going to use again here, justify content center. Hit save. Oh, actually first, you know what, I'm just going to do this. Hit save, and now the breadcrumbs are centered. But what about this search bar? I don't want that to be taking up the whole space of the viewport as it is. So let's take a look at what's going on in the developer tools and get a sense for what we can do to change this. You'll see the class of form control here includes a width with property 100%. If I just disable that 100% part, then the width of the form control goes back to what it was at the wider breakpoint size, which is what I want. And it opens up these margins that I can use for centering the element using our MX Auto class, centering the right and left margins to auto. So let's look at how that works. Here's the form control. I'll start by overriding the width of 100% by putting a class on here called mxAuto, or pardon me, called wauto for width auto. Save that. And we'll see now the width is taking up the amount of space we want. Next, to center this, we can use mxAuto, hit save, and there it is. It's doing what we want. Now all we have to do is get rid of this red background, and I'm also going to put a top and bottom margin on the nav class. Good. So this now is basically what we're going for. The next step is to take care of this main section, or rather the section here with a sidebar, and then the main section for the article content. This section here is composed of a row with 2 columns. The first column takes up 3 units of space, so 3 columns within Bootstrap's 12-column grid, and the second column takes up 8 units of space, which together come to 11. Why am I not using 12? Well, I don't have to. And I decided the layout looks better this way. So the empty column is actually on this right-hand side. And of course, these are responsive, so they break right there, they stack right there, and that is the medium breakpoint. Back into the code. I'm going to start with my div and row, and within that first an aside, and then also another tag for the main content. The aside will have a class of call-md3, and the main content a class of call-md8. For now, I'm going to put background colors on these guys. So bg danger for the aside, and bg info for the main column. And to begin, let's put in some filler content. Hit save, bring it up. Good. This is what we're going for. So we're above the medium breakpoint, they're horizontal, and then at the medium breakpoint, they stack. Does anybody else feel like my HTML file is getting a bit confusing? I'm going to throw some comments in here, kind of as signposts, to tell us where we are at any given time. So I'm working right now on the main section. I'm just going to call the sidebar along with the main column all the main section. Up here I'll do the same thing for the breadcrumb section. And I've got some cleanup to do on the header. So let me just point out one little faux pas I've made. In the header, I've used an h1 tag to create what is just effectively my logo, you and me widgets. Now, normally your logo would not be written out in text like this. It's typically going to be, you know, an SVG or whatever, some kind of image file. So this really shouldn't be an h1. What I want to do is change this into a div, so I'm not wasting my h1 on it. And then this, my article title will be the h1, subtitles will be h2s, and this heading for the articles in this section on the sidebar will be an h3. So I think that's a more rational use of my h1, h2, h3 heading hierarchy. So step 1, change that h1 to a div. Now, one thing that's going to happen here is it's not going to look like an h1 anymore. That's not right. But don't worry, Bootstrap has a class for that too. So if I just throw onto the class, onto that div, a class of h1, it'll cause the typography to match an h1 heading. And now it looks good again. Okay, back down to the main section. Let's see where we're going with this. First, I want to do the sidebar. So this will be first an h3 heading for articles in this section, and then an unordered list with all these links. That's easy enough to do. So start with my h3. Now I don't want it to look like an h3, so I'm going to put a class attribute on it and make it an h5, because that's going to look better. Articles in this section. Save it. Yep. Oops. Oh, yeah. Yep. There it is. Articles in this section. Now for the unordered list. UL. Within that, I think I've got 5 LIs. Each LI is going to have a class of my-2, and each LI will also have an anchor tag for its content. First, manual. Second, video guides. Third, product information. Fourth, how to get the most out of your widget. And last, realize all your widget dreams. Let's stop there for now, hit save, see how it looks. Yeah, okay. So what's the difference between this, besides all the ugly background, and this? This guy has no bullets, whereas this guy does. To change that, I'm going to go onto the UL, throw another class attribute and a class name of list unstyled. Hit save, perfect. And for a finishing touch, I want to change that margin, so I'm going to give it margins on all sides of M4. Good. So I believe those two are now the same. Except for the text decoration. This guy's got those underlines, and this side doesn't. And my background danger is really making it hard to see. So get rid of that. And on each A tag, I'll put a class attribute with text decoration none. Good. So now those are the same. The next order of business is to take care of this main section. That means we're going to have this H1 heading under it, this product support thing. This is in a small sized text, so we'll use a utility class for that. Then it's just paragraphs and subheadings. We'll remove that random content, put in an H1 heading that's all about your new widget. Under that, a paragraph tag, and this will have a class attribute with class of my4 and text small. So we'll see what that looks like. Inside it, there's going to be an A tag for a link, and inside the link, product support team. A line break, and then it'll say updated 1 year ago. Let's save that and see how it updates. Okay, yep, down at the bottom there. That's what it looks like. So this is our small Bootstrap class, our small text class in Bootstrap. Next, another paragraph tag, and I'm going to put 35 words of random text using my lorem ipsum extension. And under that, an H2 heading. This will say getting started. And it'll have a class of H3 to make it a bit smaller and text muted. Let's save that and see what happens. There we go. And down at the bottom there is our text muted. And we don't need that background color anymore, so I'll just remove that. Next, 2 paragraph tags. And I'll throw another, say, well, 25 words of content inside both. Update that, yep. Another H2, again with class attribute of H3 and text muted. And this one will say finishing up. 2 paragraphs, lorem ipsum of 30, and we're finished up. Except I only have 1 paragraph. Oh, there it is. Lorem ipsum, I'm going to make it 20. There we go, good. Let's get a better look at this. So that's what it looks like. Now, how does it compare? Oh, something's wrong here. Got my heading the wrong size. Yeah, I made that an H1 heading, but I wanted it to look like an H2, so I'll just put the H2 class on there, and yeah, now they're the same. We're getting close enough to being finished that I'm going to start losing track of which website is which. I'm going to add some spaces into this HTML to clean it up a little bit. Last, all we have to make is this button group. So back into the code, down at the bottom underneath this paragraph, I'll put another paragraph tag, and I want this to have a class to make a larger font size, and that is FS4. Again, this is another Bootstrap utility class, and by now you're noticing that there are tons of Bootstrap utility classes. Was this article helpful? So we'll start with a div, and it'll have a base class of btn-group. This button group will be composed of 2 buttons, so I'll make 2 HTML buttons right there. And I'm going to give each one a class of, first the base class of btn, and then a modifier class of btn outline primary. So let's start by just saving this. And this is what we have down here. That's our button group with Bootstrap defaults. Step 1 is to get this thing centered, and for that I'm going to actually wrap it in another div, which I forgot to do. And this div will have a class attribute of text center. Save that, and perfect. I want my button group to be a little bit larger than Bootstrap's default button group, so I'll use another modifier class of btn-group-lg. Hit save, and now it's bigger. But I'm not satisfied. Why? Because look at the goal. The goal is to get this kind of rounded pill look so that it matches the rest of our forms and buttons. So how am I going to do that? Unfortunately, Bootstrap 5, or the present version of Bootstrap 5, which is in the beta version, doesn't have an option for creating a rounded pill button group. So it's not as simple as simply going, for example, onto each of the buttons and saying something like rounded pill. Yeah, that just puts 2 rounded pill buttons side by side. So let's take a closer look again at what's going on here in the background and see if we can come up with any ideas for how we can change this. This is the element we want to change. We can see in the DevTools that the border radius of this button group is coming from the combinator btn group large with a descendant selector to btn. So if I turn that off, pardon me, if I leave that on, but change it like so, haha, now we have a rounded pill look. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste this selector, put it directly in my style sheet, and go border radius 3 rem. Save that, get out of the DevTools, and it worked. Perfect. So it's that simple. With this very small tweak to the external style sheet, we've now given our button group a customized look so that it matches the rest of our buttons and forms. Okay, awesome. We are so close. All we have to do now is put in this footer, which is the sparsest of footers, and we'll be done. So go back into the HTML. Here's where the main section ends, which means that this thing here, this div, is the end of our row containing that entire main section. And this div here is the close of the wrapper div that set a width on our content, the main width class. Then we've got our horizontal rule, and starting right here is going to be the footer. I'll do a footer tag, give it a class of main width, center that with MX Auto, and give it margins of MY5. Inside it, I want some small print type disclaimer text, so I'll use this small HTML semantic tag. And it's going to be content copyright you and me widgets. So I've actually got a copyright sign in my clipboard there. And finally, you and me widgets. And we're done. Hit save. Let's look at it. Yes, perfect. Okay, so that's the website. This is the website we were working off of, and this is the website we just created. Oh crap, there's some margin difference here. back into the code, and that is going to be up on the very top row of the main section. I need to add my5 to that. Now hit save, and now we're done. What a feeling of satisfaction. If you've been with me since the beginning of this series, then congratulations, you've made it to the end, and you are well on your way to making your own websites with the world's most popular front-end framework. But don't stop now. There's a lot more to learn about Bootstrap. This course has really only scratched the surface of what it has to offer. There are more utilities, components, and other tools at your disposal, and when you start using the source files in Sass, you open up a whole new world of customization and convenience. If you enjoyed this video, then feel free to like and subscribe. If you did not enjoy it, but you watched the whole thing anyway, then I'm afraid I can't refund you the time spent, but you can let me have it in the comment section below. And if you want to learn more about Bootstrap, then you can check out my courses available on Udemy. Thanks for watching.